A big thanks to all our sponsors, Skips and Bins. Go to their website, skipsandbins.com, email inquiries at skipsandbins.com, or telephone 0800 25 45 25 3, easy contract free and pay as you go waste collection. Thanks to Mr. Vicky's Sauces, handmade in Cumbria. Go to their website, mrvickies.co.uk, email info@mrvickies.co.uk, or telephone 01768 210 102. Thanks to United Group Travel. Go to their website, unitedgrouptravel.com, email info@unitedgrouptravel.com, or phone 01670 632 460, or mobile 0791 666 4174. They're a local company from Morpeth, and there are no strangers on our tours, just friends you haven't met yet. Big thanks to Media Arts for all the help with the video side of things. And if you want to subscribe to the channel, hit the subscribe button under the video. Click the thumb up to like the video and click share to share to your social media. If you want to help the channel financially, you can pay a one-off £25 fee. You get a cup, a scarf, a pen and a membership card and entry into the NUFC Matters monthly draw. Email john@nufcmatters.com for more details, or if you've got a smartphone, scan the QR code now and it takes you straight to the membership pack. We also support the food bank on this channel. Go to nufcfansfoodbank.co.uk and you'll find the matchday bucket. You can make a donation virtually today. You can also find us on iTunes, Spotify and other podcast providers. We also do events during the year. NUFC Matters Live will be at the O2 City Hall on Friday the 2nd of August for an evening with Rob Lee, one night in Antwerp. Tickets start at £15 and you can get them from ticketmaster.co.uk. An evening with the entertainers takes place on Friday the 24th of January 2025 at the Tyne Theatre and Opera House in Newcastle. Telephone 0844 249 1000 or visit the website tynetheatreandoperahouse.uk to buy tickets today. You can also catch me on the North East Footy Breakfast Show live on Toon Radio weekdays 7 till 9 a.m. on DAB, smart speakers and the toonuk.com.
Critics attack. It feels like I've been talking to myself again. But it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on the thoughts I cannot say to you. If I don't say the words, then maybe it's not true.
Good afternoon. Welcome to NUFC Matters. Eddie Howe's press conference review for the game against Arsenal away at the Emirates, 24th of February, 8 o'clock kickoff. And as always, Eddie faced the press this Friday morning. No Razor from Radio Newcastle. It was a guy called Dom. He asked him first up how distracting the business with Dan Ashworth had been for him over the last 2 weeks. And he basically said, hasn't been distracting at all. It's happened away from the club, and he's been too busy training the players and getting them ready for the game this weekend. So not distracting at all. He then asked him if he'd like to comment on the situation, with Dan Ashworth now going on to gardening leave, and he just said that he wouldn't comment on it. He says, "I'll leave that to others. I would like to concentrate on the football." So Dom took that on board. And asked him how Alexander Isak and Joe Willock were. He said that they both trained this week and it was good to see them both back on the grass. As for Joe Willock, it had been such a long time. It's great to see him back amongst the group of players because he's such a popular figure there. So good news on that. He asked him about Isak as well again, and he just said, look, Alex has trained really well. Didn't say that they would both be playing tomorrow, but it certainly sounds as if it is more than likely that both will be involved in some way, shape or form. He just reiterated he'd been pleased with both of their progress this week. Then the next question, Radio Newcastle seem to get a lot of questions in this. He said the reverse fixture, of course, we won 1-0. And you said it was one of the best performances of the season. High intensity, everything you would expect from a Newcastle United team. Are you hoping to replicate that? He said we certainly need to. He says we've had some good games against Arsenal over the last few years. They've always been tight fixtures, but last season we went down there. We got a 0-0 draw, and playing them at this moment in time, we need to improve defensively. Certainly going into this game, and we've been working on a few things. So ready for the game. Eddie says. The next question from Radio Newcastle was about Bruno. Obviously, one yellow card away from a 2-match suspension. Would you say that he's been living on the edge, and how important is he for tomorrow's game? He doesn't feel that he's living on the edge. He just feels that you always need your creative players and defensive players to play well. Technically, in the game against Arsenal in November, he felt that Bruno did very well, and he's hoping for more of the same again tomorrow. He pushed him on the card situation. He said, do you think this suspension that's looming over him affect him? Eddie doesn't feel like it has. He says he's managed it well. He's been his normal self, and he's played with discipline. He was then asked again by the same questioner, the fact that Arsenal played Wednesday, do you think that gives you an advantage? And he said, look, with our experience, it wasn't a problem. He says, you need to have a squad that you can rotate when you're in that kind of position, playing in Europe and going into it. He says that injury situation we've had obviously affected us, but I don't anticipate any problems for Arsenal. They'll be able to rotate their squad, and will be at their best, I'm sure. How important is this game, and getting something out of this game for your campaign to get back into Europe? And he went, look, it's another important game. We're desperate for 3 points, and we want to close the gap on those above us. Is Lewis Hall any closer? Was the next question. He said he's getting closer with every game. I'm not on top of the situation, but yes, every game you could say Lewis Hall is getting closer. Bizarre. And there's more to come on that particular story. Keith Downey gave the aggregate of goals scored by Newcastle and Arsenal in the last 6 games. And Arsenal, of course, have scored over 21 goals. Newcastle, far less than that. And we've obviously conceded more. Does this, make this a tough game that you're going into? And look, he just said, look, we can only focus on what we need to deliver as a team, and we will endeavour to do that. Keith moved on to the Arteta situation after the game in November. He said he was aggrieved after that defeat. Do you feel he got under the skin a bit and see this? Do you see this, or do you think they see this as a grudge match? He said, I don't know. He says, of course, the last game and the way that we won it, created headlines. He says, but we don't see it as a grudge match. We just see it as another opponent, the next opponent. Are you coming through the worst of your injury list? Caused a little bit of humour in, with Eddie. He says, I can't answer that question. He said he can't answer it before he'd even asked him the question. Then when he asked him the question, he says, I can't say for obvious reasons. He says, we've got a stronger team than we did have a few weeks ago. With Dan Ashworth now being on gardening leave, does that give you closure on that situation? Asked Keith. He said, yes, certainly. From our perspective as a football club, it's what we need is closure on that situation so we can all move forward. He then asked him about the role of sporting director. Is that a role that you'd like to see at the club again? Then he went, it's not my decision. He says, those above me will analyse that and find the right balance, I'm sure. Andy Sixsmith was next. He said, how do you sum up Dan's job at Newcastle United and how he did? He says, I don't think I should be going there. That's for others to comment on. We need to move forward. He did move forward quickly. And he said, how does it feel to have Joe Willock back in the squad? And he said, how does it make you feel personally? That journey, you obviously as the manager go on that journey with them. And he agreed. He just said, yeah, look, we go through all the emotions, the injuries, the setbacks. And he went, this has been difficult for Joe. He says, I would say that I've seen him mature over the course of this layoff, and I think we'll see a better Joe Willock when he returns. What does the team need to be back to what you would consider full power? Was Andy's next question, and he went, little things. He says having a full squad, obviously. Confidence is very important. He says we lost that a bit in December, but we need balance. And at the moment, that the balance is not at an optimum. So those were the things that he said we needed to be at full strength. He then asked him about Kieran Trippier. He said he's recorded 10 assists. How impressive is that for a right back? He said it's very impressive. He says he's also a guy who creates a lot of passes before assists. But we're really pleased with the way Kieran's played, this season, and he's returned, to his best form. And that's not to mention the stuff that he does off the pitch. He's such a leader, and he's fundamental to this squad. Andy then asked him about the form at Arsenal. We've had no league win there since 2010. Why does it happen that sometimes you go on runs like that? He said, well, Arsenal are a very good team, so that has to play its part. But it's our opportunity to go down there and break this, break this circuit, if you like. And it's funny because some clubs you get good runs where you go and you never lose a game for many seasons, and so it does happen. Alistair was next. He was asking him about the 8 o'clock kickoff on a Saturday night. Obviously it's a horrendous kickoff time for any football supporter who has to make some kind of journey. Is there anything you can do about it? He said, yeah. He says we feel for the fans, but we're at the hands of the Premier League. They set the times. We've just got to turn up and play the games. He then asked him about Elliot Anderson and Matt Targett and how close they were to coming back, and he just said, look, they're a little bit closer. They haven't trained this week, but they will be back soon. Alistair then said it was good to see a few of the Newcastle first team at the darts socialising. Does that please you when they're socialising together? He went, I wasn't aware that anyone was out last night. Can you give us a list of names? Which caused again a cacophony of laughter in the press room. He then moved on to Joe White and just said, look, Joe White, for example, great to see him make his debut. Alfie Harrison made an impressive debut in the 21s this week. Or any of these young players, maybe he's close to breaking into the first team. And he didn't answer the question affirmatively. He just said, look, it's nice to be able to give players a chance. Hopefully we're going to have more of our squad back. But our squad is strengthened, with the way that Lewis Miley's played this season. He's considered part of the first team pool now. So yeah, if they're good enough, they'll get a chance. Simon O'Rourke was next from ITV. Just got the one question, and again just said, the kickoff time. It's been raised in Parliament, about these crude, incredibly ridiculous kickoff times. Is there something that you'd like to see done? And again, Eddie just, said, yeah, look, it's the fans are very important, and we need to, try and help them with this situation, but we're not sure what can be done. Damien was next, one of the written press. How long as a manager do you hold on to disappointment? And he was referring yet Arteta, who, for weeks after the event in November was still going on about, this controversial goal. He said you can hold on to it for a long time. He says, I've done that. He says, but I tend not to hold on to negative things. I tend to hold on to positive things, and, they help me to motivate, me to and to benefit me. Damien asked him how careful that Newcastle will have to be with Alexander Isak, with Callum Wilson being out of action for 8 to 9 weeks. He just said, look, we'll only play him if we feel that he's fit to play, and we work a lot with our specialists, and we work a lot with Alexander, and we listen to both. So that's the simple answer to a simple question. Lee Ryder was next. It was a complicated way of going around the houses with his question, but basically just said, Dan Ashworth might have information from the club computers, but he certainly doesn't have the access to the stuff in your head. Would you say that's fair? And he went, well, I hope not. He says, it worries me if he gets into my head. He says, but I get your point. He says, I've got my own views. It's a good question, he says, but it's a vague answer. Lee then just said, last season you went down there, you got 0-0. He says, I guess if I offered you a point, you'd take it, but knowing the way you are, you're probably aiming higher, and you wouldn't settle for that. And Eddie confirmed what Lee thought. He just said, look, I'd never go into a game taking a point. I want to win. It is a big test. Reiterated again that we need to defend better. And certainly against Arsenal, you need to be creative. And he felt that we've been creatively good the last few weeks. But again, you can always be better. He then said the left back question again. Eddie, he says, where do you stand? He says, recent weeks you've been taking Burn off and putting Tino on. Is it just as simple as doing that? Moving forward. And he just said, look, there's a lot more goes into it than just that. He says, technically, he says, I watch them train. He says, yes, the left back area at the moment is an interesting area of the pitch, but I've got a lot more decisions to make than that for tomorrow's game. Chris Waff asked if Shaw was okay after last week. Yes, he's fine, Eddie said. And he then asked him about the sporting director role. Will you have some input into that? He said, I won't be involved. He says, but, it will be a role that I'm sure I will be asked about. He says they won't just consider my opinion, they'll consider other people's opinions. And hopefully, the next appointment will be somebody who is at the club for many years. Chris then read out Sir Jim Ratcliffe's comments about Dan Ashworth and how Newcastle's fee of £20 million was ludicrous, and that it was silly to put somebody on gardening leave for a year and a half. Eddie just said, I can't respond. So that was that. Dom was next and asked how important recruitment it is to the club, and your opinion again on the recruitment of the sporting director. And again, he said, look, I don't know if it's important that they take on board what I say. He says, I'm sure they will, but again, he says, I'll reiterate, they'll get opinions from lots of other people. It won't just be down to me and what I want. How useful has the extra time been on the training ground? Has that given you a boost? And he said, yeah, look, it's been really good. We've seen the benefits in performances. The squad looks healthy. The vibe is certainly better because they're training on a regular basis. And we're a lot better than we were, in December. How important is the return of Joe Willock? He just said obviously it's very beneficial, for him and for us. And he was pushed on the fact that he's had to stick with the same three midfielders, and that Lewis Miley hasn't been given the opportunity to rest. And he just said, look, from my perspective, it's we've got players coming back now, and that's a benefit. And when I've withdrawn somebody like Lewis Miley, he's come back and looked a lot better. So it's great to be able to bring Joe back into the into the midfield, and and to bring the other players back in, because it gives us a boost and gives us the rotation we've not had throughout the season. Luke Edwards went back to the old rhetoric that Eddie'd given years ago about not being here to be liked, we're here to compete. And have you lost that a little? And Eddie agreed. He says, yeah, you could say that. He says, we've not been as competitive points wise. He says, I think with the rule changes, game management's become more difficult, and because of the rule changes, the games become faster, because there's less stoppages, with the exception of VAR. So he agreed with what Luke said. He then mentioned that Willock was obviously at the club when he came in. What were your first impressions, and what do you think of him now? He just said he's got great qualities. He says to have him and Joe Linton in your midfield, is wonderful. When they're both fit, athletically and defensively and attacking wise. He says we've missed Joe Willock's legs, and the goals that he gives us. He says people tend to forget, that wonderful goal scoring run he went on when he first came to the club. And he says, I'd like to think we've developed a strong relationship. He says, I've tried to push him hard, and it's just great to see him back. Craig Hope was next. He asked him if he'd spoken to Dan Ashworth since last week, and he went no, and then he went yes, and he went, oh, what was said? And he went, that's between me and Dan. What do you hope to get from the Dan Ashworth deal? Was Craig's next question. And he went, I'm not involved in that, so I can't comment. So that was Craig Hope's questions. Dominic was next, and he said, "Is the priority getting a sporting director at the club who's here for the long haul?" He did answer that. He said, "Yeah, I said last week that ideally, you want somebody who here is for the long haul." He said, for instance, an academy manager doesn't see the results of his work, until years down the line, and he said, you want somebody who can start something and finish something. Is the best still to come from Alexander Isak? He's had a lot of injuries, said Dom. And he said, I hope so, yes. He says, but people talk about Isak's injuries, but he says he has contributed massively already with the club. He does things that other players can't do and won't do. And, it's great to see him back on the training ground and back to see him back in the squad. Oscar asked him if he'd left on good terms with Dan Ashworth. Yes, he said. And then he also mentioned that we hadn't beaten anybody in the top 3 since he had taken over the club as manager. He went, I didn't know that. Thanks for pointing that out. He says, but yeah, obviously if we want to be where we want to be, then we need to start accomplishing that, and we need to set our minds to that. Simon Bird was next. He went, can you afford to spend money, on Lewis Hall when he's nowhere near the first team? It was interesting because it's an awkward question. This, we're not getting anywhere. We're not getting anywhere with this whole Hall thing. And he just said, look, he said he is near the first team. He said, but every transfer is important. We don't have endless amounts of money to spend due to the financial fair play restrictions, and we need to get decisions right. He then asked him if Lewis Hall could be considered an academy player, and that wouldn't go towards FFP. And he went, you'll have to ask somebody else that question because I'm not aware of that. So we're not getting anywhere with this Lewis Hall thing. He's just very clever at batting the question away, and we don't really know why he is involved with the first team pool, but not getting any opportunities to show what he can do. And Martin Hardy was next. He asked, has it been disruptive the last 2 weeks with what was going on with Dan Ashworth? Again, it was a question was asked at the start of the press conference. Why re-asked the same question? He said, for the club, maybe, but not for me and the players. And then he mentioned about last season. He says, you and Arteta squared up. Are you expecting more of the same? And he said, well, I don't think I did. He says, that paints a different picture to what I remember. He said, we're both very passionate individuals, and I'm sure we'll both share a mutual respect. Can Arsenal win the league? Asked Martin. And he went, yep. He says, of course they can. He says, they're where they are in the league on merit. He says, you just need to look at the stats, everything that, points towards them potentially being up there and competing for the league, tell you that they could. So, yeah, of course they could. What they have done over the last few years, are you following their example? Asked Martin. And he went, yeah. He says, you could say that. He says, I guess you look at the way we're recruiting. He says, obviously, we've had to come from a long way back. But yeah, we are following in Arsenal's footsteps, I suppose you could say. See how many times that gets chucked back at us by the newspapers now. Remember somebody saying there was an Aston Villa blueprint for Newcastle? That Mike Ashley, that. Jordan was the final journalist asked questions. What does Tino have to do to get in the team? And do you see him as a left back? Straight to the point, Jordan. He said, I see him as a full back, and every time he comes on the pitch, he has to play well. So that was your Eddie Howe press conference. Again, very few answers, but lots of interesting chat. I'll just give a quick hello to everybody in the chat. Hi, Kevin. Hope you're well. Les, hope you're okay. John, afternoon, everyone. Time for Eddie to change things, but I'm patient. Where we are in 2 or 3 years' time is more important than 2 or 3 months. We should be doing better, though. Hope to see you tonight, John, in the chat. Looking forward to your take on the whole questions. Chronicle report and signing of a deal close. I took what Eddie said as meaning he was close to the first team. That's all I thought, Les. Got to be honest. I don't think we got anywhere with that Lewis Hall question. It's very, very cryptic, the answers that he gives. But I would certainly say it hasn't come close to signing a deal. Be interesting. I would have liked Ashworth to see out his contract, but the time he has been here, he would have put all the right schedule routines in place for us to move forward. We've picked his brains. That's a positive way of looking at it, Derek. I've got to be honest. I'd hope so, Derek. After 20 months, at least a base for the next guy to develop and improve. Yeah, very good. Trolls, good afternoon. Hope you are well. And I still think 30 million for an 18-year-old is too much, in my opinion. All about opinions, and we will be sharing ours. No, you're definitely not going mad, Les. We will be sharing our opinions tonight on the Three Amigos. We will be live at 5, so it is a live show. Look forward to seeing you then. And don't forget, tomorrow morning, we've got another one of those supporters group programs. This time, well worth a watch with the Supporters Club in Iceland. So set your reminder, hit the like button, set your reminder for that. And if you haven't already subbed, why not? Please click the subscribe button. It is free. We do 7 shows a week. I'll be back at 5 o'clock. Take care, guys.
We still do 7 NUFC Matters show a week for free. But if you want to help support NUFC Matters, then there are a few ways of doing it. Hit the like button on each live broadcast and video. This helps the channel grow. Hit the subscribe button and select the all notifications bell so you don't miss a single show. If you want to help us financially, then you can join the channel using this button with the membership starting at $1.99 a month. Or you can drop us a donation in the chat using a super sticker. We're also looking for sponsors. If you'd like your brand advertised on the flyers for the show and featured during the ad break, then email John at nufcmatters.com to arrange today.